WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny's on the air, helping you to stay safe in a world where danger never takes a vacation. On this episode of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast, we interview Leawood, Kansas Fire Department Division Chief Brittany Brown about residential fire sprinkler code development. Welcome back to all 13 of our loyal listeners to another installment of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Fireman Kenny Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or whatever platform you're listening to the show. There are a number of CRR champions who make great strides in reducing risk in their communities. Those efforts include promoting CRR on a daily basis, as well as local code development. On this episode, we will interview Leawood, Kansas Fire Department Division Chief Brittany Brown about instituting residential sprinkler codes when she was in her previous position in Colorado. Before we begin the podcast, we would like to mention our sponsors. For over a century, the National Fire Sprinkler Association has been advocating for a stronger industry and a safer world by promoting fire sprinklers in model codes and legislation. Their mission is simple: to protect lives and property from fire through the widespread acceptance of the fire sprinkler concept. Be sure to follow the National Fire Sprinkler Association on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can visit the National Fire Sprinkler Association website, www.nfsa.org. We would also like to thank our friends at Fire Suppression Solutions, distributor of fire suppression products for the fire service and for home use. You can follow Fire Suppression Solutions on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Now a word from Fire Suppression Solutions.
Fire can strike without warning, leaving you with precious little time to react. And if you are not prepared, the damage can be devastating to life and property. In the blink of an eye, your home or business could be on fire, with flames doubling in size every 30 seconds, leaving you helpless and unable to respond. Don't let this nightmare become a reality. That starts with being prepared. Our fire suppression products are designed to equip you with an effective response to any fire emergency, all while limiting additional damage, making you the true first responder, giving you the peace of mind that you have what you need to keep your loved ones and property safe until more help comes. Do you have a plan to respond to a fire emergency at your home or business? Protect your family, pets, and property with the tools from Fire Suppression Solutions. Contact us today and finish putting your plan into effect before it's too late.
For more information on Fire Suppression Solutions products, you can visit firess.us. Welcome back to all 13 of our loyal listeners to another installment of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast. With us on this episode is Division Chief of Fire Prevention and Fire Marshal Brittany Brown from the city of Leawood, Kansas. Brittany, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kenny. This is Brittany Brown. I'm currently the Division Chief of Fire Prevention here in Leawood, Kansas, but I just moved from Colorado, where I was the Division Chief over there for Fire Prevention for South Adams County Fire Department, which is in Commerce City, Colorado, northeast Denver area. Been Fire Marshal, the fire service for almost 20 years. And mostly working in prevention, fire investigation, and public education.
So for all of our listeners, Brittany and I met when she came into Wisconsin for the Wisconsin State Fire Inspectors Fire Prevention Professionals Conference. Brittany did a number of presentations. She is also involved with Vision 2020. So Brittany, why don't we talk about your presentations as well as your activities with Vision 2020?
I first kind of got involved with Vision 2020 when I really started moving towards community risk reduction. And I was really lucky to get on the Vision 2020 Strategy 1 leadership team. So we kind of focus around Community Risk Reduction Week and our patch wall and really getting more momentum kind of behind community risk reduction.
So the main focus of the Fireman Kenny Show podcast is fire prevention and community risk reduction. Vision 2020 used to have CRR Radio, which was hosted by Ed Camo and ended shortly after Ed's retirement. CRR Radio then focused on the projects involving CRR and data collection and correcting the problems. Since there is no more CRR radio, occasionally I will be focusing on CRR with some of our guests. So Brittany, you worked on a sprinkler initiative when you were with South Adams County and Commerce City. Why don't we start talking about that initiative? How did it get started?
So I was working at Eastern Kentucky University. I was a professor there for 2 years, and I was really looking forward to getting back in the fire service. Colorado is really progressive in, fire prevention and fire and life safety education, and I saw this job opportunity, and it was with the South Adams County Fire Department, which is in Commerce City. So I was hired in May, and also in that same May, about a week and a half, 2 weeks before I was hired, they had gotten a fire sprinkler ordinance passed. Colorado is a home rule state, so that's authorized. But when the ordinance was passed, it was only given an implementation date of 6 months. So within 6 months of May, which, mind you, I was hired in May, we had to start sprinkling all homes. Every home in Commerce City that was a new build within 9 feet of a lot line, which in the city, it's very hard to get them to separate homes anyways, needed to have residential sprinklers. So it was a significant amount of work trying to get that program kind of up and running. We still had to generate a lot of support for it. We had to have a lot of logistics as far as everything from water meters to water lines to plans to permits to fees, really define the scope of this program, which I was excited to take on. It was a giant program though, but I was kind of selling it because I think it got passed as a plumbing system only, which we did end up changing the entire ordinance, I think 2 months into my tenure with South Adams. But no, we had to get all this whole thing up and running from nothing in less than 6 months.
Brittany, in one of your presentations, you talked about how the adoption did not go smoothly and the fire district almost lost the ordinance more than a few times. What kind of struggles did you have in keeping this ordinance adopted?
It was kind of a challenge from the start. So I got in and we started figuring out, oh my gosh, we don't have anything planned. We did almost lose it, and this was what I would consider probably the disaster ordinance. Everything that could have gone wrong did in this case. We didn't have some stakeholders at the table that probably should have been there from day one. And I had just started there. Probably one of the biggest things that was probably the most challenging initially is that this ordinance passed in May. I was hired in May. The chief building official was hired in September, and the water district manager was also hired in September. And kind of effective date, what we call adoption day, is November 15th. So we weren't ready. We had all three just been hired. But no, we wanted to get this passed. We'd got it passed, but we wanted it to be actionable. This was actually such a disaster. I've done several presentations on this ordinance of kind of like what you need to do before you do this so that, yes, Commerce City still has their ordinance. They're still sprinkling homes, which is fantastic. But at least from the lessons learned perspective, other people could learn from what we didn't know.
Brittany, you had a number of significant challenges as far as promoting the home sprinkler systems and the home sprinkler concept. I'm assuming you had a pushback from a number of stakeholders, including homeowners, builders, and you said even the water department wasn't behind you initially. So let's talk about some of those pushback issues that you had to deal with.
The ordinance was passed, but there really wasn't any guidance. Everything from what size water meters we need to what size water lines, what systems are we going to authorize? Are we going to authorize multi-purpose versus 13D systems? Does that include a backflow? Because that's also dives into the state statutes. Are we going to allow density calcs in a 13D application? We weren't even sure when I got there which agency was going to do plans review. We didn't know if anyone was going to collect any fees. What would we do with existing infrastructure, remodels, rebuilds? Like how are we going to work with all of this? So we kind of started where any program needs to start, which is education. So it was kind of reselling the entire concept of, okay, we need fire sprinklers. We absolutely have a huge fire risk here in Commerce City. We need these systems and they're not as expensive as you think. So included in the original ordinance was that the water department was not to include a price hike for the enlargement of the water meter. And it was the water department's decision to actually upsize all meters to a 1 inch. So all lines going into the building, everything directly from the main to the meter and then to the house would all have to be 1 inch. So it was kind of a back and forth of how do we achieve the correct hydraulic calcs. But even the water department was not initially on board because they didn't know about it. The ordinance had passed, and I remember going to the water department district board meeting 8 days before adoption day. So this is November. This is like, I think it was like November 7th. And unfortunately, the water department district board didn't know. It wasn't necessarily that they were pushing back so much. It was that they didn't feel included as a stakeholder. They did obviously get on board. It was just a lot of meetings. Sometimes we're having meetings sometimes twice a day to get everyone on the same page, because the builders, of course, are impatient and they just want to know, when do I submit plans? For an ordinance that was passed and supposed to be effective November 15th, we didn't actually approve our very first set of plans until March. And that also involved hiring an entirely new person. We ended up hiring the residential fire sprinkler plans examiner. We hired Preston, who ended up doing just residential. Because to put Commerce City's growth kind of in perspective, it's a huge growing city, but also we had an increase in population by over 10% since the last census. So huge growing city, lots of new infrastructure. On average, homes that would have fit the parameters of the ordinance, it would have been about 2,500 homes per year. And neither us as the fire district or the city could really support, a minimum of 2 inspections per home, plus plans review for every home coming into Commerce City.
Brittany, one of the bigger problems that comes into of selling the idea of residential sprinkler systems is the perceived costs. There is a cost every time you add something into a home. Let's talk about how you overcame the obstacles of promoting that cost to the builders and to the homeowners.
We went right back to the math. So the math is kind of where I live. I love the data, and I love it when the numbers speak for themselves. I am an engineer by trade. That's what I went to school for. So I love when things can be supported by data. So we just started pulling data. And unfortunately, there's not like a really great consensus nationally for what fire sprinkler systems cost. I know NFPA says that, it's about $2 per square foot for new installation. But in Commerce City, we thought that would be very different, because Colorado, and Commerce City specifically, actually has a 20% higher cost of living for housing than anywhere else in the United States. It's one of the most costly places to live. So we knew that would be a problem. And then we had additional stuff. Our water department did dictate that we needed a backflow for every system, which would have been an increase of at least $250 per home. But we started getting the numbers, and things were actually much cheaper, even in Commerce City, than we thought. I was able to pull all the numbers directly from my contractors. I mean, you have to figure I'm talking to these contractors almost every single day because they're working for the home builders. I don't want the home builders to be mad at them because we're not communicating. So all of us are communicating at all times. So I worked with my contractors and figured out that it is about 2.74 to 3.52 per square foot in Commerce City, which with the cost of the home, that's actually 1 to 1.3% of the cost of the house. So it's way less than the national average. Even some of the NFPA numbers say 2%. We were hardly 1. So we were using those numbers. We were also selling the numbers for our water department. We actually did a water department cost benefit analysis for the cost of money it takes to put out a fire on behalf of the fire department versus how much we may actually use with suppression with our fire sprinkler systems in our home fires. So we're trying that. And then we have our building incentives. So some of our trade-offs, one way into a neighborhood versus 2. And if you really get into the dirt, really get into figure out those numbers, it's actually more advantageous for the builders to just install these systems. Because most of these buildings, they're 2,500 to 3,500 square feet. In some cases, they're not taking more than 15 to 20 to 25 heads. That's it.
Brittany, one of the other challenges you experienced were legal challenges. Why don't you tell our listeners about the legal challenges you experienced with this project?
There were significant legal challenges because at one point, construction effectively stopped in Commerce City, which that's not okay for anyone. So we had to come to a consensus. So we did have meetings, as I said, sometimes almost once a day. And so I'm talking to my contractors, usually with my building department, but then the water department, the city, and I, because we're all 3 separate entities. That's how it works as a district. The water department does not work for the city, and neither do I. But all these 3 very separate, independently governed entities are working together. What we figured out is that we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know which systems we were going to authorize. Initially passed as a P2904, multi-purpose ordinance. The calcs were not going to work. In fact, they weren't permissible by the IRC whatsoever because the length of the runs for the line coming from the main or to the main were in fact too long. So we had to authorize 13Ds. We had a lot of conversations about meters. But anytime you change the size of a meter, now we're impacted by the supply chain. So that was almost a potential crisis. And then just kind of going back and forth, are we going to make them install backflows? They want to double check backflows. Are those required to be reported by the state to the state? And then who's going to maintain that? So the home builders are just we're talking to them, but I gave every single home builder my cell phone number. I had my work cell phone. And I said, I will update you the minute that I know anything, and then just put them in a giant email chain. So almost every day I was giving them kind of what I knew, but they wanted to keep building. So we ended up, it was concessions. Essentially what it turned into concessions is that they wanted to build, we needed them to build, but we didn't know enough. So we said, okay, you can go up to shear. Here's shear only permits. Okay, you have existing water line infrastructure. That's a 3/4 inch line. That's authorized, but you're going to do a 13D, and we're going to authorize density calcs. So it was kind of, how do we go back and forth of achieving what they want, but also continuing to push this ordinance? Because no one wants construction to stop, and construction did stop in Commerce City. We didn't want it to, but it's kind of the nature of the beast. When you can't get all of your ducks in a row, it's a problem. But no, we were facing potential repeal, potential moratorium. At one point, I don't know if it was just a joke, but one of the home builders said he was going to sue the city for loss of revenue, which may have been well within his right to do so. But we were just kind of sitting there waiting and just trying to figure everything out as much as possible because we just wanted everyone to be okay. We wanted our citizens to be safe. Commerce City does have a really high fire risk. But if we didn't have any of our stuff together, we can't even tell the home builders what to build. And if they can't build, then they're losing money. And, they're our partner. We need them to be able to build, nice, safe, sustainable homes. But without our direction, they're kind of just stuck in the mud.
As all of my listeners know, I'm a huge supporter of fire sprinkler systems, especially residential fire sprinklers, often promoting residential sprinkler saves. You had a significant challenge in trying to promote the home fire sprinklers. One of the things you did was invite the media for a home burn. Why don't you tell the listeners about that burning down of that home?
We had a really unique opportunity. So I have the 27J school district workforce co-op program, which is a really cool program for our high school kiddos where they actually learn the trades. And in part of learning the trades, they literally build an entire house. So everything from the electrical to the mechanical to, they frame it, they roof it, they do all of these things. And they build it as a partnership with the fire department, and it's all grant-based. And at some point, we have this beautiful home being built, and someone's like, do you want to sprinkle it? I was like, oh my gosh, of course. So I had 3 fire sprinkler fitters on staff. That was who my plans examiners were. And so we said, hey, let's sprinkle this, but let's burn it down, and let's see if our sprinklers work. So we documented the entire process of the building and the sprinkling of this home, knowing fully that we were going to burn it down. The intent of this project is that the students build the home and then the fire department uses it for training. And this is really the first time fire prevention had been involved. So we're like, okay, we're going to burn down this house. So we turned it into a massive event. It was one of the cooler things I've gotten to do in my career. We had black line gas meters out there to do tenability. So we actually had full gas monitoring and metering the entire time we're out there. And I wanted to show people, because that's one of the ways that you can really sell life safety is to show people. So the goal was we were going to invite hundreds and hundreds of people, and we would do live demonstrations. And it's not a side-by-side. This is a full house, and it's furnished, and it has flooring, and it has, appliances. It has everything from a coffee pot to a stove to cabinets. And we're going to let people walk through it. And we're also going to have live temperature monitoring. NFSA came out, the National Fire Sprinkler Association, and they brought their entire thermocouple team. So we wired up the entire house. We did the entire thing with GoPros, so you could actually watch the fire grow and develop. So we invited all these people, put them under canopies. It was hot. I think it was May. And we said, we're going to burn this house down, but we want to show you how these fire sprinklers work. It's one thing to do a side-by-side. So we had them all do a walkthrough. I think we had over 150 people, representatives from almost every single home builder came out, and they walked through this house that was a full house. And then we set it on fire. And we did 2 bedrooms, one with a sprinkler, one without. And then we had my hazmat team there with, standalone gas monitors. And then every time the home was tenable again, we would walk people through, and you can see the damage. So then we took all the data. So we have all the tenability data. We wanted to look at things like, does get low and go work? Don't hide, get outside, close before you doze. We wanted to ensure that we could kind of use this as like a multifaceted approach for a lot of PR in the future. So we did a lot of filming. We took all the data from our thermocouples, figured out at what temperatures things actually went off. And some of the cool things that we revealed is that we had the last burn that we did, which was the fully involved room, no sprinklers. And even after that, we let everyone walk through. We let everyone walk through the entire time. But we had the second bedroom that was included in this little home, and that had the door closed, and we had gas monitoring in there. So even with a fully developed room fire, it was still tenable the entire time in the second bedroom. So the Close Before You Doze was a great campaign for that. All of our thermocouples were in accordance with UL 199. So they were set, at different thresholds. But we had the entire house wired up for that. Also, the media came. Fox 31 News came and did a whole study on why we need residential fire sprinklers. And they did a whole video and everything of what we were doing there and how we wanted to promote these. And sometimes you just got to show people. And that was one of the ways that we did.
Brittany, one of the significant challenges is to making sure that the homeowners are aware that first, they even have a sprinkler system in their home, and second off, that there is upkeep that goes with it. How did you go about educating the homeowners on the upkeep of their sprinkler systems?
Part of that was people don't know that they're there. And in a lot of cases, that's okay. People blame fire sprinklers for not being aesthetically pleasing. But most of the Commerce City designs were all completely concealed heads, and especially when they're concealed sidewalls. So most homeowners probably didn't even know they had them, but we knew where they were because we had all the plans, we had everything. So what we were doing with each individual home is we had gotten all the material from the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition. So we were doing a packet with, this is your fire sprinkler system, this is what it does, these are all the parts of it, and here's your contractor, because we needed the contractor for each home, which in Commerce City was really only 2 predominant contractors that were installing these. Here's your contractor's number, and then hanging a giant, like a little packet, not a giant packet, just like a regular size packet at the riser. And we also made sure all of our risers were accessible. 13D and even multi-purpose systems, your P2904 systems, they're authorized to be in crawl spaces, but we actually didn't permit that because we always wanted there to be firefighter access. So there was a couple provisions that we kind of added in addition to the code that were like, okay, this needs to be accessible, but also when you can see it, your homeowners are probably going to have questions. So we were really excited when these homes started getting purchased, because in Commerce City, it's a very, very ever-changing housing market. So people were buying these homes before some of them were even built. So I think it was just education, getting people to know, hey, your home is sprinkled. Here's all this information for you. And then kind of recording the information that we needed to keep current with these people. Because these fire sprinklers, they're a commitment for the life of the home. They're going to be in that home pretty much until that home is no longer there. So we know that, hey, people are going to have questions with maintenance. So we made a list of every single homeowners association in Commerce City, and then got a representative from each, and we would be doing annual education to be like, okay, you do have a backflow. This is not a state-required backflow that you have to do reporting for, but it is a double-check testable backflow, and here's the people that you can contact to get this thing tested. If you have problems with your fire sprinkler system, here's who you contact. So we wanted a way to make sure we kept in touch with these people. They were having these systems installed, and hopefully they were aware that they were being installed. But either way, we wanted to make sure that, hey, they knew they had these systems, but also that they might require maintenance, and then kind of give them the avenues that they needed to contact the right people. Because it's really difficult having something in your home that you don't 100% understand. So we didn't want that to be one of those things. You may not understand your HVAC, but you should 100% know who to contact if you have something going on with your fire sprinkler system. And then just some of the normal stuff, keep your house at a temperature greater than 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't hang anything on the sprinklers, which really with most of our designs probably wouldn't have been a problem because almost all of the heads installed. And when I say all of the heads, we did the plans review for every single residence that was coming in that was getting these. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fire sprinkler heads, and they're almost all concealed. We had very few that were, like a normal style where you actually see evidence of a fire sprinkler. Almost all had the nice covers so that it's more aesthetically pleasing, which in the Denver area, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for a nice looking home, but they don't want sprinklers to detract from that image. But we just want to make sure we are staying in touch with these people to know, hey, you have someone here that will help you, but also here's all this literature, and here's the agencies that will help you. Here's Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, here's their websites. So I was just making sure we had a way to communicate with people well after their home is built.
So, Brittany, the amount of work you did with the Commerce City model has kind of spilled over into other Denver metro area suburbs. Why don't you talk about those models?
So we obviously learned a lot of ways not to do things in Commerce City with this. So one of the best things that I think came out of this, in addition to ensuring that, all of these people had safe homes, was that during the entire process of everything that went wrong, we did document it. So that did turn into an entire lessons learned approach, so that everything that you should know before adopting a sprinkler ordinance, we can give that to someone else. And so now that's all education that's just out there in Colorado. So Colorado is one of the few states, and when I say few, there's only 20 that can even attempt to adopt it at a local level because they're considered home rule. There's a ton more jurisdictions that are trying to do it, and what we've kind of figured out is that we all kind of need to unite as far as education, and then just a lot of information sharing. Because my problems in Commerce City weren't really new, but they were kind of new to Colorado. There was about 7 more jurisdictions that adopted shortly after us, but they had longer timelines. But they also got to see everything that unfolded in Commerce City, and they got to not make those same mistakes. So it turned into actually a really good learning curve, because now all these other districts, including, Adams County and Erie and Longmont, and all of these districts are either in the process, or some of them are going for full adoption, which is really cool. But they know a lot more now because all of the things that we did wrong, everyone knows. And not in a bad way, but I mean, we learn from what we should do and what we shouldn't do, usually from others. It's just whether or not they're willing to share all that. But with Commerce City, we 100% turned this into a learning opportunity because we almost lost our ordinance. We were really happy to keep it, but we don't want anyone else to be in the same spot, because the whole goal is that we have safer communities. And this should all be shared. So we did end up sharing this pretty much all over Colorado. I've even done this presentation for ICC and also over on the East Coast, because the problems in Colorado aren't unique. Everyone's going to have the same problems with water districts and home builders and, calcs and just all the normal things associated with any ordinance. So we have a lot more districts that are trying to pass, and they're a lot more prepared now, I think. But I think we learned a lot collectively as a state on this one.
So, Brittany, this has been a really great discussion about the adoption of the sprinkler ordinance in Commerce City. So do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Colorado does have a really high fire risk overall. I hope that more jurisdictions adopt. We still have a fire problem. America still has a fire problem. Even if you looked at the fire death rate per Colorado, it's still very, very high. We're about 7.4, while the nation's at about 6.5 per 1,000 fires. So we are having a lot of fire deaths. So I'm hoping that we have a lot of sprinkler saves and that these sprinklers actually do save some lives. But also I'm hoping that our overall fire risk goes down and that these systems aren't needed as much. And the aspect that, hey, we have these systems, but they're not activating, but that it just becomes uniform. That's what I would love to see in the state of Colorado.
We would like to thank Division Chief Brittany Brown for joining us on the show. For more information on residential fire sprinklers, you can visit the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition website, homefire.org. Be sure to tune into our next episode when Wauwatosa Fire Department Battalion Chief Jeremy Blair is the guest host. WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny is returning to quarters.
Magnum Media is working with first responders to help keep our community safe. The Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, National Fire Sprinkler Association, and Washington County Fire Chiefs Association proudly salute our first responders. Here's an important message from Magnum Media.
I'm Marty King from the National Fire Sprinkler Association. Home fires can become deadly in as little as 2 minutes. Homes burn faster due to modern furnishings and lightweight wood construction. These fires produce smoke that is both toxic and deadly. A fire sprinkler system is the only thing that can stop fire and deadly smoke from spreading. In less time than it takes firefighters to arrive at your burning home, fire sprinklers control the fire and allow everyone to escape. If you are building a new home, protect your family with home fire sprinklers.
The Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, National Fire Sprinkler Association, Washington County Fire Chiefs Association, and Magnum Media are proud to salute our first responders. For more information on Home Fire Sprinkler Week, visit homefiresprinkler.org.